here today on behalf of Murray's family, friends, members of our community. My name is Wayne Wilson. I'm one of the ministers at the Essentialist Church. My fellow minister, Bob Wilson, and I will be sharing the hosting duties today at the Celebration of Life ceremony for this very unique gentleman. Both Bob and I have been privileged to know Murray and his family for over 30 years. His given name was Murat. When he moved to Canada with his family in 1963, he adopted the name Murray because it was easier to pronounce and to remember for North Americans. He officially changed his name to Murray at that time, but he retained Murat as his pen name, and he was always very comfortable if anybody preferred to call him Murat. But today, in our ceremony, I will be using his officially adopted name, Murray, as he requested. I understand that in unison with our service today, there will be corresponding services held by people in Abkhazia, Turkey, France, Wales, Germany, and the US. The eulogy is divided into 5 parts. I will begin with the overview, and Joan McIntyre will cover the section on the Kebza Group formation, followed by Bob Wilson and the Essentialist Church. Then Sharon Allen will cover Murat's Abkhazian connection, and Murray the author. Bob will then be the moderator, guiding us through the rest of the program, and I will return for closing remarks. No matter how one looks at his life, Murray definitely made an impact on the world he lived in. And as he termed it, I have had a thunderous life. If God forbid I were to repeat it, I would do the same thing. My biggest challenge today is to try to be as brief as possible in giving you some background concerning his life. I know that I will leave many things out that you may want to share with us, and we have allocated speaking time on the program for these reflections. At that time, it will be your challenge to try to be as brief as possible. Murray wanted no sorrow concerning his passing, preferring that we would express joy for him. And this is our intent today. If I were to focus on the details and facts that made up Murray's life, it would take a considerable amount of time. Some have appeared in his newspaper obituary, and many others are related in his books and transcripts. With my overview, there will be some details, but mainly I would like to focus on giving you more of a background concerning his spiritual journey, as well as to create a segue in other aspects of his life that will be covered during the ceremony today, particularly after he and family moved to Canada. From Abkhazian heritage, Murray was raised and educated in Turkey. First, at an Islamic religious school until he was 10 years old. It was difficult for a young boy at this time in Turkey, just after the First World War, as well as being an Abkhazian Circassian with a culture having its own spiritual tradition and customs. Murray was living in a Muslim country which had its own customs and traditions. After the death of his father, he was sent to a boarding school. Life was pretty serious at this time. with not much opportunity for a normal childhood. He was chosen to succeed his father in the leadership role by the elders of his tribe, as he was next in line. But this was something at the time he did not want to be part of, and didn't understand really what was happening. After a short time, he backed away from this responsibility, along with the training he was receiving in the martial arts aspect of his ancestral spiritual tradition, and he refused to continue. To question authority at this time in history was to do so at your own risk. Nevertheless, Murray did plenty of it, and he was always that way. The boarding school he attended was called Galatasaray, and its graduates were often chosen for positions in the Foreign Service and Diplomatic Corps. His interest in horses, which was always apparent, even from his early childhood, now moved into competition jumping, and he competed on an international level. He received a scholarship to attend school in Paris to study chemical engineering. And although he went to Paris, he never did attend any classes. At one point after his return to Turkey, he was enrolled in medical school. But an incident that occurred there prompted him to drop this option as well. He was restless and unsatisfied, continually questioning the moral and religious standards required by Turkish society at this time. There were many who criticized him, but as always, Murray was his own harshest critic. After an incident that shook his self-esteem to the core, he descended to the point where he saw himself in a despicable and depraved light, not worthy of living. A dream led him to seek training at one of the Sufi dervish orders in Istanbul, the Bektashi. And although this Sufi order was usually closed to outsiders, he was admitted for training. The sheikh of this order, Hasan Tahsin Baba, tried to heal him of his deep depression, but Murray was still unable to forgive himself. It was during this time that Murray experienced the lowest point in his life, which, as it happened, led as well to the highest point. He had been reading both in the Quran and the Bible in hopes of acquiring some relief. He didn't know much about Jesus, but had read the passages in the Bible of the miraculous healings that Jesus had performed. He realized he needed help, and although he had never prayed before and had never really given it much credence, he made the attempt to ask for help. The result was he experienced a visionary dream of Jesus, and his deep depression was lifted. When the sheikh heard of Murray's experience, he was very pleased and recommended that it should be Jesus who he remained with and not the Bektashi. Murray had made his initial contact with Jesus, which in later years would continue to higher levels of a relationship with Jesus, all of which strengthened his knowledge, understanding, and experience with his own ancestral spiritual tradition, which paralleled what Jesus taught. At this time in his life, he married Maisie. I've heard Murray say on numerous occasions that marrying Maisie was one of the smartest things he'd ever done in his life. She was lovely, loving, competent, and most importantly, very flexible. Raised also in the Circassian culture, She could handle making a home in unsettled conditions, which sometimes required her to just hang on while supporting Murray in whatever new adventure they were involved in. Whether she was riding a horse with a revolver strapped to her hip, or cooking for 30 or more visitors, which was a frequent happening in their household, she was a gracious hostess and a loving, devoted wife and mother. Having taken over the management of his family's land, Murray started to move away from ranching and into farming. Some years later, he and Maisie, now with children, lived in eastern Turkey and found themselves in the midst of unrest and rebellion, which prompted Murray and his family to be constantly on guard, sleeping with their firearms beside them, ready to defend themselves. He carried a bullet hole scar in his shoulder from one assassination attempt. After a raid that resulted in his crops being burned, Murray supported his family by working for the British Petroleum Company as a regional representative for their accounts around the Black Sea area of Turkey. Now came the time in his life when the major decision was made to move from Turkey to Canada. Throughout Murray's life, his upbringing and personality led him to be either all in or all out. I don't know if he ever did anything in a halfway measure, something that was very apparent if you ever tried to take apart or alter something he'd constructed. He built it to last. His interest in carpentry was a hobby, and he was mainly self-taught. But he did take courses once he arrived in Canada to qualify him as a union carpenter. I can only imagine what the culture shock must have been like for Murray and family to move from Turkey to Canada in the 1960s. Added to this, Murray was not always easy to live with. He pushed himself and all those around him to reach higher and higher levels of discipline and effort. He often said that next to himself, he was toughest on the ones he had the most hope in. As a North American, I'm part of a family that I feel close to. Although my two brothers live in Ontario, we stay in touch and we get together when we can. And I know of and have met other families that are extremely close by our standards. However, in my experience, Murray's children, although they may at times have their differences, in the final analysis, I think they are one of the closest knit and bonded families I've ever met. They have always been there for each other and done their best for their parents. The visionary experience with Jesus set Murray on the road to what his mission in life really was, and that was to help his fellow man come to know themselves, and North America was ready. The move to Canada began a chain of events that has yet to be completed and is still unfolding, not only here, but around the world. Murray and family arrived in the midst of the hippie flower child revolution of the 1960s North America. The status quo was being questioned by seekers whose minds were open to new ideas. And now I will ask Joan to come up and continue her portion of the eulogy. Joan?
Good afternoon. Today it is my job to tell you how our Kebza community came together. And it is also my job to condense those 35 years of community togetherness into as short a job and time as possible. What I have to say is in part recollection and in part consultation. If you were there, you may remember things very differently. However, this is what I remember. Let's talk about our group, our Kebza community. Many of us arrived at the Monday evening spiritual gossiping sessions during the late 70s at Murat and Maisie's Point Grey house in Vancouver. Some of these folks are still with us. Others came, explored, and left. We sat in chairs and couches against the wall, or scattered ourselves cross-legged across the living room floor, sitting as erect as possible so as to understand and absorb every word. And if our sessions lasted far into the night, we sat as erect as possible to stay awake. Some of those who came in after the meeting had already started literally crawled into the room through the unlocked front door, just so they didn't disturb. Oh, we were eager and excited students, but at that point, our understanding was minimal. Some of us were from the Vancouver Turning Society, Rashad Field's group. Some of us were simply curious seekers who had found their way by following the many different paths to Murat's door. Some were E.J. Gold disciples. We were all seeking something, although at that point, many of us were unsure of what it was we wanted. And this man sat perched on the lip of the fireplace and spoke eloquently, daringly about difficult topics such as love and sex and politics and something called qanaat, which was a state of mind and body roughly translated as knowing you are provided for and also knowing you can do better. What he said sounded like truth to me. And he gallantly asked us what we thought about those same topics. It seemed to me that there was a mutual respect in this teaching process called Sovet. I seldom missed a meeting. But Murat's profession as a carpenter took him out of Vancouver. He went where work was available. And when there was no work, he created it by building houses and selling them. And he taught many of our group members carpentry while on the job. Next, he and Maisie went to the Gulf Islands and settled on Gabriola, and some of us went with them. Even while they lived in Vancouver, one or more of us lived with the Yagans, and it was no different on Gabriola. Several of us moved into the Yagan household. Everyone worked at a little cafe in Nanaimo called the Istanbul Cafe. Guests, residents, and extended family alike up at 4:15 a.m., practicing inner body and outer body exercises, showering, and driving pell-mell to the ferry terminal to catch the 6 o'clock ferry. Those of you who lived it are remembering. I can see it on your faces. And all the while, Maisie and Murat welcomed those of us who worked in Vancouver and could only visit Gabriola on the weekends. Sometimes we all slept together in the same room, sleeping bags strewn all over the rec room floor, telling stories all night long. It was on Gabriola that Murat and Maisie and the Kebza crew built Rosedale, their magnificent residence which overlooked the water from a densely wooded cliff. And during this time, Murat was undergoing an inner transformation which had already begun in Vancouver. He was moving towards teaching us his tradition of Amos de Kebza and away from sharing his Bektashi Sufi knowledge. Since Sufism had been developed from the ancient teachings, he could introduce us to Kebza and Amos de Kebza quite seamlessly. He was having visitations from his tribal elders and others during the quiet times he spent early in the morning. And our community was taking shape. When one of us did something untoward, the entire community suffered. We learned the deeper meanings of one for all for one, which had been Murat's motto since the beginning. It soon became the community motto as well. For some time, Murat followed work opportunities, taking Maisie with him wherever he could, or settling her somewhere while he went in search of work. Eventually, Murat returned to Vancouver and lived in my rented house near Sophia Street with Susan Mearns and Bob Wilson and myself. Maisie visited often. I will share with you how Murat taught me to make his breakfast. His bedroom was on the second floor. The moment I heard his first footfall on the stairs, I was to pop his egg into the already boiling water. Immediately, I was to take the pan off the stove. Then, I was to remove the egg when he reached the last stair. If I was late or early in my calculations, or if I had become distracted and missed the timing, he could tell. And well, then he wouldn't eat what I had prepared. And if I became resentful or contrite, I missed the lesson of awareness he was trying to teach me. Amos de Kebza was often referred to as the path of discouragement. And that was how he taught us, by using life as the setting for his teaching. He also taught us by example, his example. And of course, he tasked us. And we learned by intellectual explanation as well. We were a mutual gift to each other, Murat and the community. We gave him the opportunity to deliver the teaching. Meetings, talks, sobets, friendly conversations with a purpose, were religiously recorded and then transcribed. We not only were learning the teaching, we became the archivists of an ancient, previously oral tradition. These recordings became 4,000 plus transcribed pages, which in turn later served as the raw material, much of the raw material for Murat's books. In 1986, Murat's work took him to Vernon, and finally, Many of us who had been visitors in the Yagan home became full-time members of the community. Almost all of us who had previously lived in Vancouver moved here. Murat and Wayne Wilson found us a big old heritage house already divided into apartments. We bought it, did some renovations, and moved in. Those of us who couldn't move here to Vernon, stayed where they were. They continued meeting and took part in the experiment of distance education. And they missed us, and we missed them. But little by little, new people, some younger people, joined our Vernon Kebza community. And we began to teach them as Murat had taught us. And they, in turn, brought us fresh and exciting ideas. Winnipeg formed a similar study group. They held study meetings and initiated a telephone prayer bridge, which included most of the people in the United States and Canada who wanted to study but had no group to study with. There are now distance education groups spread out across the United States, South America, and Canada. In Vernon, the name of the game was Projects. We were looking for a way for us to work together and to be of service to the greater community. We were also looking for a way to offer the teaching to those who were interested. And of course, we wanted to make a living while we were at it. We explored and researched building a sunflower oil refinery, establishing a sheep farm, creating a village, and more. We are still continually looking for the best way to be of service here. In 1984, several of us invested in the swap shop, which became a thriving business for 10 years. In addition, Dr. Ralph Mattis, who was then leader of our group and well-known psychologist in town, asked Murat and his crew to build the Mattis Building, an office building in which many of us, community and townspeople, rented space for our own businesses. Murat and the community founded the Essentialist Church of Christ, which met first in the attic of our heritage house and then subsequently in a small church building located at the corner of 45th Avenue and 20th Street. We bought the building. The church currently meets at 10 o'clock every Sunday morning. At a young age, Murat developed, as you heard Wayne say, a personal relationship with Jesus. The essence of our aim in the church is to apply the teachings of Kebza to the teachings of Jesus. What an extraordinary and illuminating experience that has been. We began a Sunday school as part of the church, and several of Vernon's children, along with the children of the Kebza community, grew up in that Sunday school. Some of you are here today. Over the years, the community has sponsored and facilitated many workshops. Murat himself traveled to both coasts and gave workshops, and he wrote all but one of his books in Vernon. We established 2 nonprofit charitable societies while here, the Kebza Foundation and Kebza US. Now, I wish I could wrap this up very neatly for you, but I cannot. There is no end to this story. There is no end because we, the community, are not done yet. Not by a long shot. Although Murat has translated He is still with us in so many ways. And his love and our love meet together to sustain each other and to offer it to whomever wishes. Thanks. And now I am going to call on Bob Wilson, the other minister of the church, to speak about the church.
Hello. I am the previously and seemingly abundantly mentioned Bob, and I would like to speak with you about Murray and his involvement with our church, the Essentialist Church of Christ. Murray was a deeply spiritual man and a spiritually knowledgeable man as well. Throughout his life, he attracted the attention of people of many faiths and traditions, and many people of no faith as well, searching for an unknown better in their lives. In the years following 1975, a circle of such friends formed around Murray and Maisie in Vancouver, and in 1987 began to move to Vernon with the intention of forming a spiritual community here. They, or we I should say, purchased property, started businesses, raised families, and entered into the social life of the Okanagan Valley. In October of 1988, we decided to form a church, the Essentialist Church of Christ, and for over a decade we held regular Sunday services in the attic of the residence known to this day as the greenhouse. Murray knew that worship is a basic human need, and over time we overcame whatever allergies we had developed to the practice of religion and learned to open ourselves to divine inflow. At the time, there were said to be around 100 churches in Vernon, many of them small and non-denominational like ours. Perhaps there is some particular spiritual essence in the air here, or in the soil, or perhaps in our many lakes. Certainly, Vernon is a tangibly Christian community, and in my days as a tradesman, many working days concluded with the greeting, "God bless you, see you in the morning." I have never experienced this elsewhere. Our first minister, Ray Walker, was already a practicing minister familiar with the operation and procedures of a church, though he was chosen mainly for his good heart and his willingness to serve, always the most important requirements. In the following 26 years, a number of church members, including Murray, have served as legally recognized ministers, conducting weddings, funerals, and other church functions here and throughout the province of British Columbia. From the earliest days, church has meant church community, not church buildings, belongings, etc. And as we have raised our ministers from our ranks, any member of our congregation is welcome, indeed encouraged, to conduct a Sunday service from time to time. Murray did this often, as he was always willing to teach by example. He always held up his native tradition as an Abkhazian from the Caucasus Mountains as an example of what it truly meant to be a human being. And he had no trouble reconciling this with his love for Jesus. If anything, it increased his feeling of connection. As a preacher, he taught us to fill a space, be it our first attic church or our current church, with Spirit, Holy Spirit, and to love one another. In time, it became necessary to develop a Sunday school program, and this was successfully done by Wayne's wife, Diane, with such ability that her classes downstairs in the church regularly outnumbered the adult congregation upstairs. And as always, the preparation of children for the life ahead of them remains one of the greatest privileges and duties of any church and any community. I would now like to briefly mention two items which do much to define our church. The first is a Bible, a very large and beautiful work of art, bound in red letter with gold leaf and abundant illustrations, printed in the language of Murray's homeland, Abkhazia, a gift from Father Visario, which Murray gratefully received in March of 2008, calling our receipt of it a historic event. During a previous journey to Abkhazia, Murray and Maisie visited the Annunciation Cathedral in Sakum, where they met and were befriended by Father Visario, head of the Sakum Abkhazian Diocese. The Bible itself represents what we can call essential Christianity. It contains the four Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, plus nothing. No book of Acts, no letters of Paul and others, no book of Revelation, and no Old Testament either, just the good news of Jesus the Christ with his words printed in rich red ink. The good news spread from the earliest days by men and women transformed by the grace of Holy Spirit, eager to embrace their own Christhood and to share with those capable of receiving the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, as the expression has it. This Bible is on display today at the side over here, and I invite you to inspect it after our service. The second item I'd like to mention is our peace pole. Not long after we began services in our present church building in April of 1999, we officially became the site of a peace pole after a lengthy ceremony outside on what must have been the hottest day of summer. It seems peace always comes at a price. In 1955, a Japanese man named Masahisa Goi had the inspiration to spread the message, "May peace prevail on earth." He had survived the ravages of the Second World War, and particularly the nuclear destruction of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And like so many people around the world, he knew this must not happen again. To this end, the World Peace Prayer Society was founded and continues to this day. The stated goal of the society is to uplift, inspire, and awaken, and this is accomplished through the construction and distribution of some 200,000 peace poles throughout the world, over 320 in our province, and at least one in Vernon. In the words of the society, the presence of the peace pole, which is filled with written prayers for world peace and bears the message, "May peace prevail on earth," in English and French on its exterior, signifies a meeting place of the heart, bringing together people of all faiths, backgrounds, and cultures to embrace the oneness of our planetary family, which makes it perfectly appropriate, we feel, to stand at the entrance to our church. Murray was our church elder, and what I've said here reflects his sharing with us over many years. May he be blessed. Now I'd like to introduce Sharon Allen.
Good afternoon, dear family and friends. I am going to use Murray's birth name, Murat, because of the subject that I am addressing, which we have labeled the Abkhazia connection. I doubt there's anyone here today who does not know where Sochi is. The city on the shores of the Black Sea, with the vast range of the Caucasus Mountains rising behind it. You may well wonder why knowing where Sochi is has any relevance for our gathering here today. The reason is simply that knowing where Sochi is helps us to know where Abkhazia is. the border of Abkhazia is about 30 kilometers from the city of Sochi. Abkhazia, too, touches the shores of the Black Sea and rises up into the Caucasus Mountains. The Abkhazian people are one of many groups that make up the peoples of the entire Caucasus Mountain, a varied group of many different tribes or clans whom we know as the Circassians. And knowing something about Abkhazia is certainly relevant for us simply because the man we are celebrating today describes himself in the following words. I am an Abkhazian from the group called Abazas, who live in the Caucasian Sierra at the place called Ashkara, between Mount Elbrus and Mount Kazbek. Through his ancestry, his early exposure to the traditional lifestyle of Circassians who lived in Circassian villages while in exile in the lands of the Ottoman Empire, Turkey in our modern era. Through his training in the Kebser tradition by his Circassian elders, through his marriage to his Abkhazian wife, Maisie, and through his self-immersion in all things Abkhazian, Murat put on the mantle of Abkhazianhood and wore it proudly and fully throughout his life. In the Abkhaz language, Abkhazia is called Apsna, meaning land of soul. This is Murat's spiritual homeland, the land of his soul. The depth of this relationship is expressed in the Abkhaz adage, he who loses homeland loses all. The connection of land and soul is reflected in Murat's transmission of the tradition of Amst Kebsa to us. Abkhazia and the Caucasus is where the tradition was lived untainted for the longest period of time in our human history. The Russian invasion in the mid-1800s opened the gates to changes that led to the loss of the traditional way of life lived in full accord with the Kebser tradition. Although not lived fully for many decades or centuries even, the tradition runs in the blood of Circassians through their genetic inheritance. Murat's training with his elders awakened this inheritance in him and bonded him deeply in his Abkhazian identity. In Murat's own words, some original words used in the teaching are expressed according to their use in the Abkhazian version to which I belong. No matter where Murat and Maisie lived, Murat's interest in and love for Abkhazia never abated. Every aspect of life in Abkhazia remained a deep focus for him. This focus was lived out in different ways. Attention to daily news from Abkhazia via websites and other news media. Contact with Circassian diaspora leaders in Turkey and elsewhere. Receiving Circassian guests who felt as though they were at home under the profound hospitality always shown by Maisie and Murat. love of Circassian dance and wearing his traditional Circassian hat and shirt, routine contact with friends in Abkhazia, and friends who love and serve Abkhazia from other bases, friends such as George Hewitt, professor of Caucasian languages at London University in England, honorary consul for Abkhazia, who works tirelessly to inform the world and the West in particular about Abkhazia. Love of Apsna was of course shared by Maisie, and in 1994, Murat and Maisie traveled to Abkhazia. On their way there, they met with then President Vladislav Ardzinba in New York City. While in Abkhazia, routine contact was established with President Ardzinba's secretary, Anna Karopian, who remains a faithful correspondent and beloved friend today. In the year 2000, Dr. Vyacheslav Chirikba was teaching Caucasian languages at Leiden University in The Hague and was serving as plenipotentiary for Abkhazia in Europe. That year, he visited Murat and Maisie and our community here in Vernon. A deep and lasting friendship took root with Dr. Chirikba, lovingly known to us as our friend Slava. And he remains another source of intimate contact with Abkhazia for us. Slava later returned to Abkhazia to live there permanently and now serves as Minister of Foreign Affairs for the Republic. Slava visited again in 2002 when he met with Murat and Maisie and Kebsa friends in the United States. And later in 2002, Murat and Maisie visited Abkhazia again. It was on this visit that First President Ardzinba awarded the writer-publicist Murat Yagan the Medal of Honor and Glory of the First Class, an award acknowledging his cultural service in preserving the ancient tradition of the Abkhaz people. I have so far addressed Abkhazia mostly in terms of its meaning in Murat's life. The other side, of course, is what Murat means to the people of his spiritual homeland. After his passing, a day of memory was held in Sukhum, the nation's capital, at the Abkhazian Institute of Language and Literature. It is my privilege now to share with you letters written in honor of Murat that well express what he means to the people of Abkhazia. From President Alexander Ankfab to family and friends of Murat Yagan. On behalf of the people of Abkhazia and me personally, please accept the deepest and most sincere condolences on the death of a wonderful man, thinker, famous writer, and great patriot of Abkhazia. I decree Murat Yagan with the Chevalier of the Acht Absha Order. Murat Yagan faithfully served the interests of his homeland. Despite the tragic separation from his motherland, he managed to keep in touch with his brothers and sisters in Abkhazia. The society Kebse created by him continuously provided support and assistance to the foreign cultural activity of Abkhazia and helped to promote the unique traditions of our country. Despite the fact that we were separated from Murat by continents and oceans, the people of Abkhazia have always felt his personal support. Murat Yagan codified in the teaching Amistad Kebse the unique heritage of the Abkhaz Adyghe culture and aesthetic traditions, which have accumulated the traditional system of concepts and ideas about the essence of human existence, man's place in the society and in the surrounding nature. We grieve with you and share the pain of irretrievable loss. Blessed memory of Murat Yagan, the true son of Apsna, will remain in our hearts forever. Alexander Alkvav, Sukhum, December 23rd, 2013. From Vyacheslav Chirikpa, Foreign Minister of Abkhazia. To all who love Murat. Murat Yagan, the elder of the Kebse community, finished his earthly journey. His life was long and eventful. He was born at the dawn of the 20th century. He witnessed many calamities of that century, and he saw the first portion of the 21st century. He was a unique witness to modern history, a beautiful and accomplished man who lived a beautiful and accomplished life. I am happy to have had the honor of being one of those who had personal communication with Murat, first by way of correspondence, then by personal contact. I hope I am worthy of all the time Murat so generously bestowed on me. His wit, his great personal charm and charisma, his amazing psychological insights, his teachings, and his ideas left an everlasting effect on me, as I am sure they did on all with whom he communicated. I shall never forget the conversations we had in Canada, in the US, and in Abkhazia. And I shall never forget the gatherings we had together within the Kebse community. Via him, I came to know many wonderful people whom I remember with great admiration, including his charming wife, Maisie Gogwa. Murat was a great thinker of our time. His ideas put into his books form an impressive edifice of modern philosophical thought. I am sure his name will be known by many more people as time passes and as more of his books are published in different languages and in different countries. Murat Yagan will ever be remembered in his homeland, Apsna, or Abkhazia, which he so passionately loved with all his heart, and of which he was a great patriot. Abkhazia, the Caucasus Mountains region, as he himself was saying, was the original source of his spirituality, of his unique upbringing, one of the most sacred places on earth where you can directly communicate with God. It is sad to lose dear people. It is sadder and tragic even to lose great people. Dear all who love and who have deep respect for Murat Yagan, please accept my deepest condolences. We have lost a great man, but he will ever live in our hearts and in our minds, as in the hearts and minds of many more people around the globe. Yet we shall all miss him personally. Farewell, Murat. Upsata v'ziach chayrat. Let the abode of your soul become good. Answa apswara umirtsin. Let God not let us lose our apswara, our native Abkhaz tradition. From Sergei Shamba, former longtime Minister for Foreign Affairs and former Prime Minister of Abkhazia. Dear Maisie and family, dear Kebsa sisters and brothers, I express my deepest condolences on the occasion of Murat's death. Just like everyone here in Abkhazia, I feel this great loss like a personal tragedy. I had happiness to meet Murat once in my life during his visit to Abkhazia. This was an unforgettable time which will stay in my heart forever. We are so much grateful to Murat for his love, for the light, for his knowledge, which he was generously sharing with one and all. On the base of the Abkhazian ancient tradition of Kebsa, Murat created a teaching and opened it to the whole world. By doing it, he opened his motherland Apsna to the world community so that more and more people could learn about the country. He was a real son of Abkhazia. The spiritual heritage Murat left is the guiding star for all seekers, and we have to do our best to present it to more and more people here and everywhere else. Let me one more time assure you that just like many people here, I am sharing these hard days with you, our Kebsa sisters and brothers. Yours sincerely, Sergei Shamba. Sukhum, December 23rd, 2013. From the foundation of the first president of Abkhazia. This is a foundation established to honor and continue the work of Vladislav Ardzinba after his death in 2010. Ardzinba served as the first president of the Republic of Abkhazia from 1994 to 2005. He was deeply respected and loved by Murat. Dear family members and dear members of the Kebsa community, the staff of the foundation expresses the deepest condolences on the occasion of Murat's death. We know Murat as a light holder, the holder of our ancient tradition of Kebsa. Just like you all, we have the feeling of a big loss, as the person of Murat is very much important and very much valuable, not only for those who live in Abkhazia, but far, far abroad. The very fact that Murat created the community in Canada and has followers of his teaching shows us the meaning and importance of his work. We express our gratitude to Murat for his constant support and care that he rendered our foundation, and we are proud of the fact that the first president of Abkhazia, Vladislav Ardzinba, awarded Murat the highest state award, the Medal of Honor and Glory. We are sharing these hard days with one and all, and we hope that the spiritual heritage left by Murat will find its acknowledgement and continuation in Murat's homeland of Absna. With love, members of the foundation of the first president of Abkhazia. From Anna Karopian. Dear Sharon, I again feel like an orphan. No more our elder to talk to us. Just memories now. I have received a lot of condolences. First were from Ibrahim Jikdua, Nuri Gezerdaba, Nugzar Agruba, Vetali Gabnia, Lana Aiba, Irina Inal Ipa, Shazina Agraba, Elena Vorobejeva. The words of condolences are still coming. Neka Khintba, Marina Otirba, Roin Agraba, Vladimir Novakov. Oh God, your beloved Murat is at home now. We are still the guests here. Murat lives in his lessons, which shows us the way to peace and harmony. He lives in our memory so that we should never be lost. And he lives in my heart as I name him every morning and evening. But it is impossible to accept that he left us. We all must be closer and closer now, as Murat wanted us to be. My brother Kara and his wife Elena join me in sending our condolences to Maisie and the family and to all my Kebsa sisters and brothers. One for all and all for one. Anna. From Father Visari. To Maisie, to all of Murat's family, my condolences, my love, and my thoughts are with you. With my love and my hope that I may one day visit you, I encourage all members of the Kebsa community to be strong and to pass through these times without losing each other. Rather, support each other in everyday life and be happy and healthy. I ask God to bless you all. From Victoria Ardzinba, cousin of First President. Highly esteemed family of Murat Yagan, his close friends and relatives, dear Sharon and the whole Amsta Kebsa community. The mournful news has reached Absna. The Son, the creation of God, the noble Son of the Caucasus, the wise man who opened to us the knowledge of truth, has passed away. We are grieving with you. It is a big loss for us as well. Murat is our light, our hope, and a way to the future. There is deep sorrow in our hearts, and the irreplaceable loss makes our sorrow even greater. The philosophy of Murat is of high practical significance for everyone who wishes to understand the nature of things. We are firmly convinced that the name of Murat, his ideas, his works, are highly needed in the whole world, and in Absna in particular. Yours sincerely, Victoria Ardzinba. One of the main websites we used in checking the daily news is a website called Abkhaz World. the founder of that website, is Metin Sonmez, and he sends this message. Dear Sharon, I am sending my deepest condolences on the passing of our beloved elder. Yesterday, I have republished an article on our website in his memory, The Wise Man from Vernon by Vyacheslav Churikba. Many people have left messages of condolence as well. We will always remember him in our hearts and will continue to spread his message. Kind regards, Metin Sonmez. To close our presentation of the Abkhazia connection, I would like to introduce you to Violeta Maan. In the Abkhaz language, the root of, it's a guttural sound we don't really have in English, but it's like ran. And so you have rahans and yahans and mahans and something like that, so on. And Violeta Maan is the people's artist of the Republic of Abkhazia. Her family name indicates that she is a member of the Yagan family tribe, and she calls Murat her brother. She met Murat and Maisie during their 2002 visit to Abkhazia, and here is her letter. My condolences to the family of Murat Yagan. I was blessed to have a wonderful chance in my life to look into the eyes of the man who I had heard a lot about, the bright man who came to Apsna after the war, the noble man who glorified the Abkhaz people and who was the great relative of the Maan, Murat Yagan. We have lost this remarkable man today. It is a great loss for the whole Abkhaz nation. Words fail me when I try to express the pain I feel about him. Since the day I saw Murat, he has always been on my mind and in my heart. The way he looked and dressed and his nobility. Since the time I saw him, I have been asking myself when we would meet again. I feared that I would never have a chance to see him again, and unfortunately, my fears have been justified. I wish all the Maan were near him to be his mourners, but it is not possible. My great brother Murat, I do not have such a possibility, but let my song be with you. It is the song which I sang in Abkhaz and which is devoted to you. Violeta Maan Papa, People's Artist of the Republic of Abkhazia. The song Violeta, dedicated to Murat, is one that Canadian singer-songwriter and musician Lorena McKenna recorded on her CD, The Book of Secrets. Lorena had read Murat's spiritual autobiography, I Come From Behind Calf Mountain, and was inspired to write the song Night Ride Across the Caucasus.